betrayed me, gutted my life, then demanded I clap for her new husband. It's a strange thing, isn't it? The echo of a promise, a vow. It just sort of rings in the quietest parts of your soul, long after the voice that spoke it has moved on to whisper new promises to someone else. You think you've finally found silence, maybe even a bit of peace after the storm, and then, bam, a tremor. A demand so audacious, so completely out of touch with the devastation they caused, it feels like the world itself has just tilted. She wanted applause. For her new life, her new husband. After she had systematically, piece by piece, taken a wrecking ball to mine. Can you imagine? Standing in the rubble of what used to be your home, your life, the very foundation of your future, and the person holding the demolition plans, the one who swung the first sledgehammer, comes back. Not to say sorry, not to help you sift through the debris, but to ask you to admire the new place they've built somewhere else, with someone else. And what? To cheer them on? This isn't just about a broken heart. It's about a complete lack of decency, an insult so deep it makes you rethink everything you thought you knew about the person. Before all this, before the betrayal, before my life was gutted, there was an us. It's tough to go back there, like walking through a sunlit room that now only exists in old photos, knowing the windows are boarded up and dust is everywhere. But to really get the depth of the fall, you have to see how high we were before we tumbled. We met in a way that felt, well, destined. Sounds cliché, I know. But don't all the best and worst stories start that way? A crowded room, a chance meeting, a conversation that just flowed, like we'd known each other for ages. She had this laugh, completely uninhibited, a sound that could make even the most cynical person crack a smile. Her eyes, they had this spark, a promise of adventure, of a journey we'd share. And me? I was drawn in, hook, line, and sinker. Our courtship was a whirlwind, a blur of late-night talks, shared dreams, and the kind of laughter that makes your sides ache. We built a world together, brick by brick, on what I truly believed was mutual love and unbreakable trust. We weren't just partners, we were best friends, the architects of a future that seemed so bright and solid. The proposal wasn't some big public show. It was quiet, intimate, just like I thought our love was, deep, personal, and real. Under a sky full of stars, on a trip we'd saved up for, I asked her to be my wife. The yes was instant, tearful, and it felt like it sealed our forever. The wedding day itself is a bittersweet memory now, colored by the irony of knowing what came later. The white dress, the nervous smiles, the vows we made. To have, and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. Those weren't just words to me. They were sacred. They were the blueprint for the life I was so excited to start. I looked into her eyes when I said them, and I saw, or maybe I just wanted to see, the same conviction looking back. Our early married life settled into a comfortable rhythm. We bought a small house, filled it with mismatched furniture and a whole lot of hope. We talked about kids, about growing old together, about all the ordinary and amazing moments that make up a shared life. I remember Sunday mornings, the smell of coffee, sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, her humming softly while making breakfast. Tiny, ordinary moments that felt extraordinary because they were ours. I put everything into that relationship. Not just money, but my emotions, my mind. My hopes, my vulnerabilities, my deepest sense of who I was, it was all tangled up with her, with the life we were building. I backed her ambitions, celebrated her wins, and held her close when she doubted herself. I believed we were a team, an unbreakable unit facing life together. The trust one had in her was total, as basic to my existence as breathing. It never once crossed my mind to question her loyalty, her integrity. Why would it? We had built our sanctuary, our fortress of love, and I was convinced it was impenetrable. The thought of betrayal was so foreign, so far from the reality I knew, that it wasn't even a whisper in the back of my mind. That, I guess, was my naivety. That was the cliff I was about to be pushed off. The shift was subtle at first, so subtle you could almost miss it, like the first hint of a chill before a storm. It started with a growing distance, an emotional gap that slowly got wider. Our conversations became more about logistics. The easy laughter faded. There were more late nights at work, or so she said. More evenings where she was glued to her phone, a secretive smile on her face that wasn't for me. I tried to close that gap, to figure out what was going on. I'd ask if everything was okay, if something was on her mind, if I'd done something. She'd reassure me, but it felt hollow, like she was reading from a script. "I'm just stressed," she'd say, or "work has been crazy." I wanted to believe her. God, how desperately I wanted to believe her. It's always easier to accept a comforting lie than a devastating truth, isn't it? Then the little signs started piling up, like breadcrumbs leading to a place I really didn't want to go. The password on her phone suddenly changed. The hushed phone calls she'd taken another room. The way she'd get defensive if I asked too many questions. I was living in this weird state where my gut was screaming that something was terribly wrong, but my heart kept clinging to the hope that I was just being paranoid, insecure. The trust I'd put in her was so fundamental that the idea of her betraying it felt like reality itself was betraying me. The discovery, when it finally came, wasn't some dramatic confrontation, no tearful confession. It was much more mundane, and somehow that made it even worse. An email left open on our shared computer. A string of messages I was never meant to see. The words blurred, the screen swam. But the meaning was crystal clear. It was him. A colleague, someone I'd met a few times, shaken hands with, even shared a polite smile. The messages laid out their secret meetings, their private jokes, their connection. They talked about our marriage as an obstacle, a problem they needed to manage. The initial shock hit me like a physical blow. I remember the air being punched out of my lungs, a roaring in my ears. Disbelief was the first wave. This couldn't be real. This wasn't my life. This wasn't the woman I'd married, the woman who'd vowed to cherish me. Then came the searing pain, an agony so intense it felt like my insides were on fire. The world tilted, colors dimmed, sounds got distorted. It was the shattering of an illusion, the violent collapse of the reality I had so carefully built and deeply believed in. When I confronted her, the carefully constructed facade of our life together just crumbled. No real denials, not with the evidence staring her in the face. Just a kind of weary resignation, like she'd been waiting for this moment. And then, the justifications. The attempts to reframe her betrayal as my fault, a result of us growing apart. It was a masterclass in blame-shifting and downplaying the devastation she'd caused. There was no remorse in her eyes, no sign that she understood the pain she was inflicting. Just a chilling focus on her own needs, her own desires. The immediate fallout was a spiral into chaos. My mind, usually a pretty orderly place, became a war zone of racing thoughts, unanswerable questions, and a constant replay of every lie, every moment of deception. How long had this been going on? How many times had she looked me in the eye and lied? Was any of it real? Our shared memories, once so precious, now felt tainted, like scenes from a play where I was the only one who didn't know my lines, or that the plot had taken a dark, cruel turn. The betrayal wasn't just the cheating. It was the profound violation of trust, the shattering of the sacred vows we'd made. It was realizing that the person I'd built my life around, the person I'd trusted with my most vulnerable self, was capable of such deep deceit and cruelty. The foundation of our marriage, of my sense of security in the world, had been dynamited. And as I stood there, surrounded by the emotional wreckage, I knew this was just the beginning of a long, dark journey. The life I knew was over. She had made her choice. And in doing so, she had chosen to destroy everything we had built, everything I had believed in. The phrase, gutted my life, isn't an exaggeration. It's the closest I can get to describing the void, the hollowness, the absolute desolation that hit me after her betrayal came to light. It genuinely felt as if someone had reached into my chest and ripped out not just my heart, but my lungs, my stomach, my very core, leaving behind a gaping, echoing emptiness. The entire structure of my existence, the framework I'd built my identity and future on, was just gone. In the days and weeks that followed, I drifted through life like a ghost, a detached observer of my own suffering. Sleep? That became a distant memory, replaced by long, agonizing nights spent staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every touch, every promise, desperately searching for clues I'd missed. For the exact moment our life story had veered off from the one I thought I was living. When I did manage to sleep, it was shallow, haunted by nightmares that were barely worse than being awake. My physical health took a nosedive. I lost my appetite. Food tasted like cardboard. Headaches were a constant companion. The stress showed up in 100 small ways: a tremor in my hands, a perpetual knot in my stomach, and exhaustion so deep that even the simplest tasks felt like climbing a mountain. I was a walking, talking embodiment of heartbreak, a physical testament to the emotional devastation I was going through. The emotional toll was relentless. Shock and disbelief were there at first, but they soon gave way to a flood of other, more vicious emotions. Anger, a white-hot rage that consumed me, aimed at her, at him, at the sheer unfairness of it all. It was an anger that felt justified, yet it offered no comfort, only a bitter, burning energy that left me even more drained. Then there was the grief, a profound, soul-crushing sadness for the loss of my wife, my marriage, the future I'd pictured. It was like mourning a death, only worse, because the person I was mourning was still alive, choosing to build a new life on the ruins of ours. My self-worth hit rock bottom. I was tormented by questions. Was I not enough? Was I unlovable? What had I done to deserve this? Her betrayal became a judgment on my value as a person, and in my broken state, I judged myself harshly. Shame felt like a heavy cloak I couldn't take off, a constant reminder of my perceived failure, of being the man who couldn't keep his wife, the man who was so easily thrown away. It felt like everyone knew, like I wore my betrayal like a brand on my forehead. The world, once so vibrant and full of promise, seemed to shrink. Its colors muted. Activities I used to enjoy held no interest. Friendships felt strained. It was hard to explain the depth of my pain, and even harder to listen to well-meaning but often unhelpful attempts at comfort. Many people just don't know what to say when faced with that kind of raw grief. Some offered platitudes, others advice I wasn't ready to hear. Isolation became my refuge, though a dangerous one. The home we had shared became a mausoleum of memories, every object a painful reminder of what I'd lost. Her scent lingered on a pillow, her favorite mug sat in the cupboard, photographs mocked me from the walls. It was a constant, relentless attack on my already shattered senses. Professionally, I was a mess. Concentration was a luxury I couldn't afford. Deadlines were missed, meetings were endured in a fog. The ambition and drive that once defined me were gone, replaced by a dull apathy. How could I care about spreadsheets and targets when the very fabric of my personal life had been torn to shreds? The sense of betrayal was so profound because it wasn't just one act. It was the result of countless lies, deceptions, and a complete disregard for me as a human being. It was the realization that the intimacy we shared, the vulnerability I had offered her, had been turned into a weapon against me. The future we had planned, the kids we'd talked about, the places we dreamed of seeing, the quiet moments of growing old side by side, all of it vanished, obliterated by her choices. There were moments, in the depths of this despair, when I wondered if I would ever feel normal again, if the pain would ever stop. It felt like a permanent state, a new, bleak reality I was condemned to live in. The person I was before the betrayal felt like a stranger, someone naive and blissfully unaware of the cruelty the world, and the people in it, were capable of. This was more than just a breakup. It was the demolition of my identity, the gutting of my soul. And the path back to any kind of wholeness seemed impossibly long, shrouded in darkness. Getting out of that abyss wasn't a straight shot. It was a slow, agonizing crawl, often 2 steps forward and 1, sometimes 3, steps back. Healing from a betrayal like this isn't like recovering from a cut that neatly stitches itself up. It's more like trying to piece together a shattered vase, knowing it'll never be exactly the same, but hoping to get some of its shape back, some of its use, even if the cracks always show. The first step, weirdly enough, was just accepting how much pain I was in. For a long time, I tried to numb it, to run from it, to pretend I was stronger than I felt. But real healing couldn't start until I let myself feel the rage, the grief, the despair, without judging myself for it. I had to sit with that awful discomfort, let the waves of emotion wash over me, as terrifying as that was. Trying to bottle it up, I learned, just made the agony last longer. Reaching out for help was crucial, though incredibly hard for someone who'd always prided himself on being independent. I started therapy. Those sessions became a lifeline, a safe space where I could untangle the mess of my thoughts and emotions without feeling judged. My therapist helped me see that my feelings were valid, that the trauma was real, and that what happened wasn't a reflection of my worth. She gave me tools to process the grief and to start challenging the negative self-talk that had taken hold. Support from true friends and family was also a huge part of it. Not everyone got it, and some relationships frayed under the strain, but a small, loyal circle rallied around me. They didn't have easy answers, but they offered their presence, an ear to listen, a shoulder to cry on. They reminded me I wasn't alone, even when I felt like the most isolated person on the planet. Rebuilding my identity was probably the toughest part. So much of who I was had been tied to being her husband, to our shared life. With that gone, I felt adrift. My therapist encouraged me to rediscover parts of myself that had gone quiet, to explore old hobbies and find new interests. Slowly, very hesitantly, I started too. I began hiking again, finding a strange kind of peace in the solitude of nature, in the physical effort that quieted the noise in my head. I picked up a guitar that had been collecting dust for years. The simple act of creating something, anything, felt like a small act of defiance against all the destruction. Setting boundaries was another critical step, especially with any necessary communication with her, which was minimal but couldn't be totally avoided because of the practical stuff involved in separating our lives. Limiting contact was essential for my sanity, preventing more hurt while the wounds were still raw. Each interaction, no matter how brief, felt like picking at a scab, but I learned to keep them strictly business, without the emotion she seemed incapable of acknowledging or respecting. There were small victories along the way. The first night, I slept all the way through without waking up in a cold sweat. The first time I laughed for real, without it feeling forced. The first morning I woke up and the very first thing in my head wasn't about her and the betrayal. These moments were like tiny glimmers of light in the darkness, but they were enough to keep me putting one foot in front of the other. Forgiveness was a concept that people brought up a lot, but in the early stages, it felt impossible, almost offensive. How could I forgive such a deliberate act of cruelty? My therapist helped me understand that forgiveness, if and when it ever came, wouldn't be about saying what she did was okay or letting her off the hook. It would be about releasing the hold the anger and resentment had on me, freeing myself from the poison that was eating me up. This was a long, ongoing process, not something that happens overnight. For a long time, the focus had to be on self-compassion, on forgiving myself for not seeing the signs, for trusting someone so completely who didn't deserve it. The healing was, and in some ways still is, a process of reclaiming myself. It involved a lot of soul-searching, a lot of tough emotional work. It meant facing my own vulnerabilities, my patterns, and figuring out what I truly needed and deserved in a relationship. It meant understanding that her betrayal was about her character, her choices, not about my inherent worth. The scars are still there, a testament to the battle I fought. But slowly, painstakingly, I was starting to build a new life from the wreckage, a life that was all my own. The pain was still there, but it no longer defined me. I was learning to breathe again, to live again, though as a changed man. Just when I thought I'd made it through the worst of the storm, when the huge waves of grief had started to calm down into something more manageable, she popped back up. Not with an apology, not with any sign that she understood the devastation she'd left behind, but with a request so unbelievably audacious it felt like a fresh attack, a deliberate twist of the knife in a wound that was still incredibly tender. It came as a message. I hadn't heard from her directly in months. Our communication had been practically non-existent, filtered through lawyers or short, sterile emails about the logistics of our separation. Seeing her name pop up on my phone sent an instant jolt of adrenaline through me, that fight-or-flight response I'd learned so well over months of pain. My heart hammered against my ribs. What now? What other complication, what new demand was about to be dropped on me? I hesitated before opening it, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. The message was brief, almost casual in tone, which only made its cruelty even worse. She was getting married. To him, of course. The man she'd had the affair with, the co-architect of my life's implosion. That news alone was a bitter pill to swallow, a harsh reminder of how quickly she'd moved on, how little our years together had meant in the end. But it was the sentence that followed that truly floored me. "We're having a small ceremony next month," it read, "and we'd both really love it if you could be there. It would mean a lot to us if you could come and, well, share in our happiness. Maybe even say a few words, wish us well." And then she added, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, that she hoped I could clap for her new husband. I read it once, then again, and a third time, because I was convinced I had to be hallucinating, that the words on the screen couldn't possibly mean what they seemed to mean. Share in their happiness? Say a few words? Clap for the man she left me for? The man who helped shatter my world? The sheer, unadulterated nerve of it was astounding. It was beyond insensitive. It was a display of narcissistic self-absorption so profound it was almost pathological. Disbelief quickly turned into a cold, hard anger, different from the hot rage I'd felt right after the betrayal. This was a focused fury, a clarity born of absolute contempt. How could she be so utterly disconnected from the reality of the pain she had inflicted? Did she genuinely believe that the emotional carnage she'd caused could be so easily swept aside, so conveniently forgotten, that I'd somehow be willing to show up and celebrate the very union that was built on our broken vows? It felt like she was deliberately trying to provoke me, a final, cruel way of asserting her power, her indifference. Or perhaps, even more chillingly, she genuinely saw nothing wrong with it. Maybe in her mind, her happiness was the only thing that mattered, and any pain I might still be feeling was just an inconvenient detail, if she even thought about it at all. This demand wasn't just an invitation. It was a command to validate her choices, to legitimize her betrayal, to publicly forgive her by my very presence and, God forbid, my applause. The request to clap for her new husband was the ultimate insult. It was a demand that I not only witness but actively celebrate the new life she had built on the ruins of mine. It was a demand that I erase my own pain, my own dignity, to make her narrative, her triumph, look good. It was a level of disrespect so profound it almost defied understanding. For a moment, I was speechless. The sheer nerve of it took my breath away. All the progress I'd made in healing, all the fragile peace I'd started to build, felt threatened by this single, outrageous message. It was a stark reminder that for her, my feelings, my suffering, my very humanity, were irrelevant. She hadn't just betrayed me. She was now demanding that I be an active participant in the spectacle of her new beginning, as if my role was to be the gracious loser, the magnanimous ex who cheers from the sidelines. The audacity was staggering. It wasn't just about wanting me there. It was the expectation that I would want to be there, that I would somehow be happy for them. It showed a complete lack of empathy, a terrifying void where understanding and compassion should have been. This wasn't just rubbing salt in the wound. This was grinding shards of glass into it with a smile. This, I realized, was the final, ugly chapter of her betrayal. After the initial shock and that wave of cold fury washed over me, I was left with this weird sense of clarity. Her demand, as outrageous and offensive as it was, actually did something useful. It was the final nail in the coffin of any lingering doubt, any tiny shred of hope that there was a decent human being hidden somewhere under all her selfishness and deceit. It made everything crystal clear. My fingers hovered over my phone's keyboard for a long time. Part of me wanted to just unleash hell, to spell out every ounce of pain and disgust she'd caused. I drafted and deleted several scathing replies, each one nastier than the last. But then, a calmer thought surfaced. Why would I give her the satisfaction of an emotional outburst? Why would I waste any more of my precious energy on someone who had proven, over and over, that she was incapable of understanding or caring? I realized the most powerful response wasn't anger, but indifference. Or, at least, the appearance of it. To engage on her level, to get dragged into an argument, would be to give her outrageous request a legitimacy it didn't deserve. She wanted a reaction, Maybe even a dramatic refusal that she could twist to make me look bitter and unreasonable. I wasn't going to give her that. So my actual reply was short, almost clinical. It read, "I will not be attending. I suggest you refrain from contacting me again." No explanations, no accusations, no long rant. Just a clear, unmistakable boundary. A full stop. An end to her access to my life, my emotions, my peace. Sending that message felt like a profound act of self-respect. It was me, finally and completely, choosing myself. Choosing my dignity over her drama. Choosing my healing over her need for validation. It was a declaration that her actions had consequences, and one of those consequences was the permanent loss of any claim she thought she had on my time, my attention, or my emotional labor. Did she reply to my message? No. And frankly, I didn't care. Her silence was irrelevant. What mattered was that I had stood my ground, calmly and firmly. I had refused to be drawn into her twisted story where my role was to applaud her betrayal. In the days that followed, instead of feeling consumed by anger, I felt a strange sense of liberation. Her demand, in its sheer absurdity, had inadvertently cut the last, frayed string that connected me to her. It was a clear demonstration of how far removed her reality was from mine, how little she cared about the wreckage she'd caused. And in that, there was a twisted kind of gift. It made moving on, truly moving on, not just something I had to do, but a relief. Reflecting on the whole nightmare, from the seemingly perfect beginning to this final, insulting demand, the lessons are hard-won but priceless. I learned about how fragile trust can be in the depths of human cruelty. But more importantly, I learned about my own resilience. I discovered a strength inside myself I never knew I had, an ability to walk through fire and come out the other side, scarred, yes, but not broken. The journey of healing is still ongoing. There are still days when the ghosts of the past whisper, when a pang of sadness or a flicker of anger reminds me of what I lost. But those moments are fewer now, their power is less. The experience, as devastating as it was, forced me to rebuild my life on a foundation of self-awareness and self-respect. I learned to value my own peace, to protect my boundaries fiercely, and to be far more careful about who I let into my inner circle. Her demand that I clap for her new husband was the perfect summary of her character, a final, grotesque flourish that highlighted everything she was. And my refusal, my quiet and firm no, was the epitome of my healing, a quiet assertion of my worth, a reclaiming of my story. I would not clap for her. I would not celebrate the destruction of my life. Instead, I would save my applause for myself, for surviving, for healing, for choosing to build a future where my happiness doesn't depend on the approval or validation of those who've shown themselves unworthy of it. This journey has been incredibly isolating at times. If you've been through something similar, if you've faced betrayal and the long road to recovery, please know you're not alone. Share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. Sometimes, just knowing others understand can make all the difference. And if this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more narratives on navigating life's toughest challenges and finding strength in the aftermath. Your support means the world. The expectation to applaud the architect of your own devastation is a unique kind of cruelty, a psychological torment designed, whether they realize it or not, to diminish your pain and validate the betrayer's actions. It's a demand for emotional subservience, a final act of control. But in that demand, there's also an opportunity to draw a definitive line in the sand, to reclaim your power, and to choose self-preservation over performative forgiveness. The scars of betrayal may fade, but they serve as a permanent reminder, not of being a victim, but of survival, of the strength it took to walk away from the wreckage and to refuse, absolutely, to clap for the one who lit the match. My life is now my own, and the only applause that matters is the quiet, internal acknowledgement of my own resilience and my commitment to a future built on truth and self-respect. What you think about this story? Write in the comment your opinion. On my channel, you can watch other revenge or cheating stories. See you soon, my dear viewer.